Halloween is just around the corner, and what better way to get into the spooky spirit than with a tale from Meadow Cottage in Dodleston, England? An 18th century brick and stone cottage-style house once owned by a man named Ken Webster. This historic house has a story as old as time, and as we dig deeper, we'll uncover its long-buried secrets. But Ken's experience with Meadow Cottage was anything but ordinary. He soon realized that the ghosts of this charming cottage were far from peaceful. These spirits didn't rely on ancient whispers and eerie apparitions to make their presence felt. Instead, they reached out to Ken using cutting-edge technology, delivering their accusations and admonishments from the past. So get ready for a tale that combines the old-world charm of an 18th century cottage with the mind-bending twist of modern technology. It's a story you won't want to miss. But hey, why keep all this fascinating knowledge to ourselves? Join our community of curious minds today by subscribing right away and unlock the world's curiosities on Becker's Casual History. Meadow Cottage, nestled in the English countryside, seemed like your typical 18th century charmer. That's what Ken Webster thought, at least. But oh boy, did things take a spooky turn. First up, we've got these bizarre six-toed footprints etched in the dust, and they seem to have a mind of their own, practically strolling up the cottage walls. Naturally, Ken and his girlfriend thought it's a prank, as anyone would, but this wasn't your typical ghost story. Now the cottage was in the middle of a renovation frenzy. Ken, feeling all DIY-ish, grabs a bucket of paint, thinking he could just brush away these pesky footprints. They didn't budge with cleaning, after all. You'd think that's the end of it, right? But oh no, these six-toed imprints had their own plans. Surprise, surprise, they made a comeback. And that's not the end of this ghostly roller coaster. They experienced mysterious cold winds swirling around, shadows playing peekaboo, and the constant feeling of an invisible entity just hanging out. They even found stacks of cat food tins arranged like a pyramid, because who doesn't love a dash of quirky in their supernatural experience? Now here's where it gets extra peculiar. The ghosts at Meadow Cottage decide to go digital. They wanted to chat with Ken, so how do they do it? Well, they turned to the most convenient gadget in the house, Ken's home computer. It's a haunting that takes modern to a whole new level. But here's where the plot thickens even further. These Dodleston messages pouring in through Ken's computer were written in a way that would baffle even the most seasoned cryptographers. Misspelled English and cryptic, they read like riddles from a ghostly puzzle master. The grammar was so bizarre that it set off alarm bells. As Ken and the others tried to decipher these spectral texts, a peculiar notion started to take root. They might be hearing echoes from the distant past. This suspicion gained some credibility when one message boldly claimed to hail from the year 1546. These eerie missives began when Ken borrowed a computer from the school where he taught, keeping it at home. At first, he figured someone had preloaded these messages onto the computer. But that quaint theory went up in smoke when the ghostly messenger accused Ken and his girlfriend of being home invaders, essentially, for stealing its home. And guess what? That's when they realized this entity had been living with them for quite some time. It was like a spirit roommate with a bone to pick, and it's becoming clearer by the minute that this entity might hold the key to the history of the place. The very first message that Ken and Debbie received from their computer was a bit puzzling. It seemed like the mysterious entity already knew who they were, but it didn't say their names until they introduced themselves. This initial message, known as the first Dodleston message, wasn't easy to understand. It arrived as a strange, spooky poem, and it was pretty hard to figure out. Ken and Debbie had never seen anything like it. The cryptic poem talked about things like bad dreams, fame, growing up, and the end of life, as if it was trying to summarize everything about life and death in just a few lines. After this, there was a second message a few days later. The second message they got was written in old-fashioned English, like how people used to speak long ago. In this message, the entity praised Ken as a good man and called Debbie a creative woman, like it really admired them. But the main point of the message was to scold them for being in its house. The entity was pretty upset, and it even accused them of stealing it, which it thought was a very big crime. On the other hand, it seemed confused about some of the things in the house. It talked about a light that the devil makes that Ken and Debbie used. When they looked at it closely, they realized the entity was talking about electricity and the electric lights and gadgets in the house. You see, the entity claimed to be from the mid-1500s when there was no electricity, so it didn't understand it and even thought it was harmful, like the devil's light. In this message, the entity said it was writing on behalf of many. That could mean there are more entities in the house, and this one was just the first to speak to Ken and Debbie. Or it might mean it's speaking for all of the spirits around the area or in the world. But these messages were really confusing, and they could have lots of meanings. They signed the messages as LW. And later on, when paranormal investigators got involved, they started calling the entity Lucas. The way Lucas wrote the messages matched the old-time language and dialect it mentioned in its messages. But the Dodleston messages didn't stop there. More messages kept coming for over a year, making the mystery even more intriguing. So who's the mastermind behind the Dodleston messages? Throughout that time, when Ken and Debbie were in touch with the entity, they tried to learn more about it. They grilled it with questions about its identity, its origins, and its life story. Yet the entity wasn't exactly an open book. It would sometimes come up with tall tales just to check if they were from the future or not. After some intense digging and research, they thought they had it figured out. They believed the entity was none other than Thomas Harton, a vicar who had a stint in Gloucestershire back in the 1550s. After that, their messages began coming from the year 2109 with an interesting twist. It seemed like they were referring to more than one person. This means that the messages not only jumped forward in time, but also took on a mysterious quality, as if they were authored by a group of individuals rather than just a single entity. This development adds a layer of intrigue and complexity to the story, leaving us with questions about the nature and origins of these messages. These messages, my friends, are an intriguing tale where you can choose your own path. Were they from the future or the past, or just some computer hiccup? Or perhaps Ken was weaving a story to sell books and take advantage of public curiosity. The truth is, it's a mystery that's as confounding as ever.